Hello and welcome to episode 22 of series 4 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from The Big Picture People. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who's been reaching out to us to offer to be a guest on the show. We're always grateful for people who want to be on the show, who are looking to be an interviewee. So if you are interested in that, please do drop us a line. We'll get back to everybody who's been in touch with us. The easiest way to contact us is info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk if you are interested. We do have interviews now recorded pretty much up to the end of this series, up to the end of 2023. So if you do want to be on the show, it's probably going to be in the next series, in series 5, which we're going to be putting out in 2024. But we already have quite a long list of people who we are speaking to about being guests. So if you do want to be on the show, you'll just have to be patient. And again, thank you for those of you who have reached out and offered to be an interviewee. Okay, what have we got coming up then in the next couple of episodes? On the 24th of October, we have an episode going out with which is an interview with Richard Nugent. Richard has been on the show before. Richard is from 21 Leadership, and he's going to be telling us all about the Alignment Advantage, which is a book that he has just written recently, which is all about how organizations can align their strategy, their culture, and their customer experience. Really, really good book. Fantastic theories, ideas, concepts, very usable ideas in there that Richard's got. So I thoroughly recommend that one. And then coming up on the 7th of November, I have an interview with Jen Sproul, who is from the IOIC, and Susanna Holton, who is from Ipsos Carrion and Box. And Jen's been on the show at least a couple of times. Probably this is her third or fourth appearance on the show. Jen is the chief exec of the IOIC, and we're going to be looking at the recent survey, recent report that has come out of the survey that the IOIC and Ipsos Carrion and Box have put together, which is all about what our employees think of internal communication. So we're going to be summarizing some of the findings of that report, if you've not already seen it, and going through some of the lessons that we can take from that as employee engagers and internal communicators. So I think you'll find that a fascinating episode. So yeah, that's 7th of November for the Jen Sproul and Susanna Holton episode. So that's it for now. That's all all I'm going to cover off in this introduction, and we'll move straight into this episode's interview. Imagine you work in an organization or an industry where success is measured on very fine margins. Not only seconds, but fractions of seconds will define what performance and good performance looks like. And also imagine that it's vitally important that everybody in the organization knows how they contribute towards that performance. Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at the world of Formula One. Now, some of you may not be interested in Formula One. It may be something that you kind of watch occasionally or aware of. But it's actually a fantastically interesting industry, because now Formula One teams are employing thousands of people, and they have all of the routine and mundane challenges that we have in our own organization when it comes to communication and what we're communicating about. But what organizations or Formula One organizations have is that ruthless focus on performance and driving performance and making sure everyone understands their contribution. So that's what we're going to be exploring in today's interview. We have a guest with unique experience, more than 25 years of working in some of the best Formula One teams, most high-performing Formula One teams that have carried Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button to their world championships. And our guest is going to be telling us all about the challenges of communicating and keeping internal communications going in that sort of environment, but particularly as those teams have grown over the last 20 years or so, from small teams of around 300 people to now employing more than 2,000 people in multiple sites across the world. We'll talk about that evolution as well, and how that internal communications and employee engagement challenge has evolved. So that's what today's interview is all about. It's how internal communications can learn from the world of high performance. My guest today is Nicole Byrne. Nicole is a member of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, the Institute of Internal Communications, and is an accredited PR practitioner. Nicole is also former head of internal communications at Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. With responsibility for internal communication, events, and company CSR programs at this World Championship winning team, Nicole has has experience in internal comms in a high-performance industry. Hello, Nicole. How are you?
Yes, good. Thank you, Craig. Thanks for inviting me to the show today.
It's an absolute pleasure, and as a self-confessed Formula One fan, I always find it fascinating to speak to people who've worked in the industry, but not only in Formula One, but obviously internal communications, which is why we've got you on the show today. So, whereabouts are you, Nicole? Whereabouts in the world are you, just for our listeners?
So I'm based in Brackley, which is where the Mercedes Formula One team is also located. And it's a very small town on the North Oxfordshire, Northamptonshire border in England, in the UK. So yeah, that's where I am today.
Fab, excellent. And I said you were former head of internal comms at Mercedes AMG Petronas. Tell us what are you up to now? What does your working world revolve around at the moment, Nicole?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, I was head of internal comms at Mercedes-AMG Petronas until the end of May this year. And then I set up my own small consultancy looking at internal comms and employee experience called the Comms Exchange. And so I've been building that up over the last couple of months as well, and working on some projects for some clients. So it's all very exciting stuff.
Yeah, fantastic, excellent, and yeah, and a big transformation for you as well. So yeah, and I know we've been chatting about that. So yeah, fantastic. So I know when we had our pre interview conversation a few weeks ago, we had a really fascinating conversation, and you've been working in Formula One for I think up until more recently, as you've just said, it for about 25 years, and you worked for 4 different Formula One teams in various different incarnations. So lots of 25 years. Summarize your Formula One history, and also how you ended up in internal comms in Formula One as well, which is, I guess, I guess people are thinking internal comms in Formula One. How does that work? So yeah, so tell us a little bit about that history. So those sort of F1 fans or people who have some knowledge of F1 can kind of position your history, but then also how you transition to internal comms, please, Nicole.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a very long story, but I'll try and give you a sort of potted version. So, yeah, I didn't set out to work in Formula One originally. I used to enjoy watching it on TV as a kid with my dad. And I followed the sport for a number of years. But sort of back in those days, I think it very much seemed like it was a sport for the boys, as it
Mm,
were. The drivers and the mechanics and the engineers were all male, and the teams were a lot smaller than they are nowadays, and there weren't just sort of such a wide range of roles as there are, I think, in a Formula One team nowadays. So it didn't strike me as something that you could do as a career. Um, and also, I didn't get on very well with maths at school. So
mm.
engineering was very, very not, was definitely not the career that I was looking at. So yeah, I think in those sort of days, you didn't become a mechanic unless you were, I don't know, Charlene from Neighbours or something.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
for those who are as old as I am.
Mm.
But I was good at languages, and so I studied French and German at school, and then went on and I did a degree in Russian and linguistics at university.
Mm.
And that led me to spend 4 years living in Moscow, working at the British Embassy and the British Council in Moscow in the early 1990s. And then I moved back to the UK in '94 and took a job working as a PA to the boss of the first private Russian oil trading company.
Mm.
And that's where I really got my first experience of going to a Formula One race. My boss at the time wanted to take some of his business buddies to a sort of for a VIP day out to the British Grand Prix. And he asked me to make some arrangements and go along with them to manage the day for them. And of course, in those days, money was no object for the Russian oil companies.
Mm.
So we flew into Silverstone on a helicopter and had the best hospitality and the best seats on the start finish line. And, I watched Damon Hill win the British Grand Prix, and I was hooked. I just loved it. The atmosphere. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go back again for a couple of years after that, just as a spectator. And then I just started watching the other races on television and, subscribing to the Formula One magazines and getting to know about the teams and the personalities and the drivers, and just got into it as a fan, really. And then just before Christmas, 97, the Russians that I was working for closed the London office, and I got made redundant. So I decided to take a month off over Christmas and look for a new job in the new year. And then in the January, I got the London Evening Standard newspaper, turned to the job section at the back, and first thing I saw was an advert for a PA to the team principal of a brand new Formula One team called British American Racing. So the timing was perfect. I was looking for a job. They were looking for a PA. So that's how I got into Formula One. So originally I started as the PA to the team boss, and then developed the sort of internal comms from that, really. I spent a couple of years in the early 2000s working within the comms team, or being part of the comms team as the press officer. So traveling to races and tests and looking after media relations and trackside communications. Then when my son came along in 2003, I moved back into a sort of factory-based role.
Right.
Spent a couple of years doing IT and finance admin around the factory and learning about how the business side of things works. And then, and all that time continuing to sort of do the internal comms as a bit of a sort of side role, I suppose. There wasn't a specific function for it. And I also looked after the team's charity work, local community work. And then in 2007, I became personal assistant again to the new team boss, who's a gentleman called Ross Braun, who joined the team as the team principal. And I was his EA through the sort of year when the team became Braun GP, and we won our first world championship. And then I continued right the way through looking after the sort of internal comms, even though I didn't have that title. I was sort of writing all the leadership communications and organising town halls and managing team events and things like that. So when Ross left the team at the end of 2013, I then split my role and officially took on a sort of 50% role as internal comms manager.
Yeah.
Looking after the technical director at the same time as his EA.
Yeah.
And then when he left the team at the end of 2016, I then moved permanently into the marketing communications team as head of internal comms.
Right.
And had the remit to look after all of the internal comms, employee events, employee rewards, CSR and charity work. And I did that for a few years.
Wow.
So it's a bit of a roundabout route.
Yeah, no, and thank you, and well done. 25 years in whatever that was, about 4 minutes is tremendously well done, and yeah, thank you. No, and as I say, as a sort of self-confessed Formula One fan, some of those names that you mentioned there, Ross Braun and that era where, again, even if people aren't F1 fans, they'll have heard of Jenson Button and that amazing year when he won the World Championship, and then obviously now into the Mercedes era where Lewis Hamilton, I guess, even if you never heard of Formula One, you'll have heard of Lewis Hamilton. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So they're sort of iconic names within the sport, especially within the UK. But I think Lewis is a global superstar really
absolutely. Now. Yeah. And I guess what we've picked up from that very, 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 very good summary was that evolution as well, not only for you and in that kind of, sort of PA, and then starting to pick up a little bit of internal comms, and then through to 50/50, and then fully dedicated to kind of more comms and communications, as that evolution. And I guess during that period, I guess the teams that you were involved with, there was an evolution there in terms of sophistication, and because I think when you mentioned I mean, even back in the days when you saw Damon Hill winning races, there was still a kind of a, it was the sort of I can't remember what they call it now, but the kind of the sort of the gentleman racer sort of teams that there were back then. A kind of an engineering outfit rather than what they are now, which is a kind of very sophisticated businesses. I guess you've seen that some of that transition in your career as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has changed a lot. I think when we first set up the team back in sort of 1999, there were probably 300 people.
Yeah.
And nowadays, an F1 team will be upwards of 1,000 people.
Mm.
And Mercedes has two separate manufacturing and design factories based in two parts of the UK, based Northamptonshire. And that probably totals, I would say, a workforce of around 2,400.
Wow.
Both on the sort of operational and chassis side in Brackley, and then the engine power unit side up at Brixworth. So they are much, much more professional organisations than they were 25 years ago. They are more business focused, and the budgets, I think, have increased quite considerably over that time as well. So so they're much, much different organisations.
Yeah, and I guess the challenges of going from a business or any organization, regardless of Formula One or any industry, from 300 to 2,000 plus, brings with it all of those growing pains and all of the necessity to have a good internal comms team and people involved in that. So can you just give us a quick flavor again, leading into the kind of more into the internal comms angle on this, is that organization of 1,000, 2,000 people, because obviously again, and people who probably watch Formula One every now and again, or just a brief passing awareness of it, will think, well, there's just a couple of drivers and bunch of people at the track and maybe a few people to drive the lorries to get the to and from. There's obviously, I'm sure people realize it's more sophisticated than that. There's a huge pyramid of people below the kind of people we see every other week who are absolutely vital for this business and for the organization. And like any business, tend to maybe feel, not are the ones that are sometimes the more difficult to kind of keep on board and engaged, or even in an organization like yours. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So I guess it comes with all of the challenges of a business of that size, regardless of what industry you're in. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think, one of the people that I worked with very, very long time ago when I first joined a Formula One team said to me, well, we might as well be making washing machines. Because for the vast majority of people in the factory, they never travel to races. So they're effectively designing and building a product. And that's what a Formula One team is. It's basically a high precision engineering company. It just has a sort of a racing team at its core. And the team at the track that you see is really just the tip of the iceberg. It's only about 10% of the whole company that actually go to races. And the rest of the company are involved in that product design. So it has R&D, it has manufacturing facilities, inspection, proof testing, assembly, in the way that you would have with any other product. It's just that product gets handed over to a group of mechanics and engineers who then take it to race at a racetrack. So sitting alongside that sort of operation, you've then got all of the standard functions you would find in any other company. So finance, HR, marketing, communications, IT, services for the facilities, legal. That's all, as you would find in any other organization. I guess, and within Formula One teams nowadays, most of them have also got a sort of client division as well, which takes on some customer work. So at Mercedes F1, they have the applied science division, and they work on external products and projects for other organizations. So, there is an element of a sort of client consultancy work as well. So in terms of actually how you're working with that organization, you've got a very diverse organization. Some of them are traveling, but the rest of them are factory-based across a number of different shifts in the manufacturing space. You've got office-based personnel. You've got hybrid working. We've got fully remote teams in places like Malaysia with Petronas, who look after the oil and fuel for the car. We've got people in Australia and Singapore working for us. So it's a very sort of diverse organisation, lots of international team members from different countries.
And I guess with all comes up, the mundane activities associated with being in a part of a big organization every day. Not everything is all about how many, how fast the lap was at the last testing session or last qualifying session. There's other things going on which are just typical that you'd find in any other business, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the main difference between a Formula One team and a normal company is the pace of the product development. And the fact that the organisation, whilst it is an engineering company and has all of the processes and procedures and systems in place that an engineering company will have, it has the mentality of a sports team as well. So it operates like an engineering company, but it thinks like a football team or a rugby team. So it has to be able to respond to rapid change. It has to be quite tough in terms of the sort of resilience of the organisation to change, and it has to be agile and innovative. And it's also it's a high profile environment as well, which can contribute a certain amount of pressure as well. So whereas most engineering companies may make a product change and they've got a lead time to lead into it and they know that the change is coming and they will plan it. Within a Formula One team, you may have to react overnight to something that's happened at track or, in a sort of a competitive environment. So that can make things slightly more interesting for people back in the factory.
Yeah, no, and that transitions nicely into what I wanted to talk about next, which is what are some of those lessons and what are some of the things that organisation. I know it's difficult because all you've known for the last 25 years, or the majority of the last 25 years, is that environment. And I guess I know when I've been I've been out of corporate life myself for a lot longer now, sort of 14 years or so. But I know the company I worked at, even now, I assume that companies do the same things that we did back then, and it's not always the case. I think when you've worked somewhere that is we've got a really high performance culture, it's very you kind of think, well, every organization has that, so it's difficult sometimes to be kind of objective. So I mean, what do you think some of the things, because that's the bit that really fascinates me and what I wanted to talk about, is that kind of high performance culture, how that translates into how you communicate to each other, and that kind of those, I guess some of it links obviously to the values and the people you've recruited in the first place, and that kind of ethos and that kind of winning mentality. But what could we take from that, and what could someone who's listening to this, who maybe, well, highly unlikely they work in another Formula One team, working in a different type of organisation, pick up on that kind of culture of communications, the speed that you have to make decisions, and how that then translates into your communications, but also the sort of the culture of the company as well. Sorry, there's obviously a lot of things there, but I think you get. Hopefully, you understand where I'm going.
Yes.
But
Yeah. I mean, I think to start with, I would say that there are some parallels with other organisations in that communication is basically critical. It's key in any organisation, and in a Formula One team. The car is a product, unlike in any other company, I guess, is a product of of contributions from many different areas of the organisation, and they will need to work together. Because if the team doesn't collaborate, then success doesn't happen on track effectively at the end of the day. So I think within any organisation, and Formula One teams are the same. It's very important that there are some clear guidelines that people know where they're sort of aiming for, and that they have a very clear vision. So in any organization, I think every team just needs to have that the goal, that purpose, that North Star that it's aiming for. So the first thing is really leadership establishing that direction for the organisation.
Mm.
And with support from internal communications, making sure that they can clearly articulate that as well.
Yeah.
And then how that gets woven into, the team's culture and the team's vernacular across the year, effectively. So, I mean, the way that it works at Mercedes was that, in January of each year, the leadership team would have an offsite and would formulate this, what they call a statement of intent, which was basically the sort of mission for the year, the purpose about sort of how we're going to achieve the goals that we're looking to achieve this year. And then that would be translated into, from the kind of overarching company intent down into a kind of department level intent, and then into individual objectives for the year. And that really then became the narrative for internal comms for the season. So we would then weave that across all the channels, various touch points. It would become the sort of marker for individual and team performance reviews. We'd pull it into the quarterly State of the Nation briefings, picking up, elements of it in articles and across our digital and communications channels. And it just really guides the stories that internal comms are telling around the team internally. And then that also guides external communication as well. What you see in the social media and what we're seeing, in the team interviews that the key people are giving at the track. It's all making sure that all of the language, all of the references, all of the statements that people are making are all connected back to that overall intent. Just so that we're making sure we're giving people a really clear line of sight into how each individual contributes to the overall performance of the team. Or, in a case of a Formula One team, that's the car on the track. So that's, I think, one of the biggest points, really, that where Formula One connects, and I see that within other organisations. We talk a lot about having that purpose, but the question is how does that purpose get communicated? And it is a really mindful process, I suppose, to just try and make sure that purpose is really embedded into the whole culture of the organisation, and people really understand why they are doing what they are doing, and they are able to be proud of their contribution, because that then gives a sense of the empowerment and the ownership and the responsibility to want to try and improve.
I really like that, and again, it reminds me back to my kind of corporate days where I worked in an American multinational, a really, a company I'm still proud that I work for, and I know we had that philosophy there of at the beginning of every year we would set out our kind of strategic goals, and that kind of was a cascade down from the kind of corporate goals, because we were a kind of a department or a site within a broader structure. But then we would make sure that we had what we call our, it was very kind of, I don't know, must-win battles was the terminology we used, but it was basically 4 or 5 things that we are focused on this year in achieving, and make sure that everybody in the manufacturing facility knew that they were our must-win battles. And again, make sure that we talked about them on a regular basis, about how we're progressing against those, and make sure everybody understands their role in delivering them. And I think, again, it's great to hear what you're saying there, because I think that is something that organizations can do. I mean, we work with a lot of clients and see a lot of clients and hear a lot of sort of people talking about, we've got these goals and these ambitions, but never really help break it down into those sort of strategic kind of elements that everybody can contribute towards. It kind of stays at a pretty vague level. And obviously I think something like Formula One, there are many different ways of measuring success, but it's a lot more visible than and obvious than a lot of organizations. For some organizations, it's often a bit more ambiguous about, because they've got multiple different ways of defining success. And with F1, it is, I guess for some teams, it's not realistically going to be winning every race or even a race a season, but it's going to be making progress towards being better and more competitive, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, we used to talk about, how does each individual team member contribute their tenth of a second of performance to the
yeah,
car?
yeah,
And a tenth or a hundredth of a second makes a big difference in Formula One. So
yeah.
everybody would be able to say, and we used to do interviews with our team members, and we used to run a series called Meet the Team, and in each of those interviews we would ask everybody, so how does your role
Mm,
contribute to the success of the car on track? And I never met anybody who couldn't clearly articulate
mm,
exactly how they contributed to the overall success of the car,
yeah.
whether they were, in site services, or whether they were in a performance center coach in the gym, or whether they were, somebody in the marketing team. Everybody had a really clear understanding of exactly what they were doing, what they were
Mm,
contributing to the overall success of the team.
mm,
And that, I think, was something that comes from that cascade of,
yeah.
those really clear statements of intent across the year.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not just good performance management. It's like it's fantastic employee engagement, isn't it? If you can articulate that, and you're part of something bigger and you're contributing, it's just for me. It's if you haven't got that, then well, how do I know what I'm meant to be doing? And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And also it contributes to that sort of sense of empowerment,
mm,
I think, that people have. One of the kind of core pillars, I guess, of employee engagement, of intrinsic motivation, is really ensuring that people feel empowered
mm,
to innovate, to create, to bring their ideas. And if people believe that they are contributing to the success of the organization by
mm,
doing that, then it really reinforces that and enables them to continue to, feel that as well.
mm,
Brings that sort
absolutely.
of sense of ownership, that sense of responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. Just conscious of time, and I just want to kind of there's one area I'd like to area I'd like to explore with you. So I know you've said you're now you've got your own business, and you're focusing on helping other organizations to learn, to tap into your expertise and your background in building happy, high performing teams,
Mm.
through good internal comms and great employee experience. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that. But one area I'd like to talk to you about, because again, this is something that resonated for me when we spoke before, was this idea of alumni. And again, for people who aren't familiar with the idea, and I'm familiar with this from my previous corporate experiences, this idea that people leave organizations. That's a natural part of life and business, and people move on to do other things. But this sense that it's almost like the follow through of a kind of a tennis stroke, isn't it? Is that it doesn't the way we look after the people who are alumni of
Mm.
organisations and communicate with them and treat them as just because they don't work for us anymore doesn't mean that we don't have that connection with them. I know that's something that's really important to you, and not just the only thing that you're focusing on, but one of the things that we kind of definitely resonated when we spoke. Just want to tell a
Yeah.
little bit more about your work now, but also that principle of having a great alumni network and why it's important for organizations to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'll start with my aim with the comms exchange really is just to help companies to take a bit of a holistic look at the experiences that their employees have every day that they come into work, and then put some steps in place to ensure that those experiences are the best they can possibly be.
Mm,
And so that starts with, the very first interaction that a potential employee might have with your brand, for example. What messages are they seeing? How are you communicating externally? And then on through their experience with the application process, the recruitment process, to onboarding. Again, how is that all communicated? What
mm,
impressions are you giving people? And are they learning the things about your organization that you need them to understand? And ensuring that they also understand the purpose of the organization, how they can contribute to it, that tenth of a second.
mm,
So there are some foundations, I think, within any organization that need to be in place for that to happen, and for people to have that experience. And there are these sort of key touch points moments, I guess, on every employee journey throughout an organization, and through their sort of life cycle with that company, where internal communication makes a really big difference by just connecting people to the purpose of the organization, the information flow within it, connecting them to each other as a community. And those are the moments that matter, I suppose, if to coin a phrase that people use quite frequently. Those moments, and they can be they can be moments of challenge, they can be moments of change. It could be moments where people have been rewarded with promotions. People may take sabbaticals, parental leave, all of those really key moments. It's looking at how the company is communicating with those people at that point, so that you can then map those moments, understand them, and put strategies in place to make sure that they are managed, really, really well. So talking about the alumni, that my feeling is that doesn't stop when people leave the company. So, both your employees and your leavers are future ambassadors for your brand. And are adverts for your company as a potential employer. And so, the better their offboarding experience and their overall experience of the time that they spent with your organization, I think the more likely they are to recommend you to others. We often talk about within employee engagement surveys, we talk about the employer net promoter score. It's, how likely are you to recommend this company is a great place to work. It's also looking at how likely people would be to return to your company if you decided that you wanted to hire them back later on in their career. So it's building that pipeline, I think, of people who have felt valued and have enjoyed the experience that they've had with your organization. And so treating people well when they leave, I think is as important as how well you treated them when they worked for you. And so I think as you said, many organizations realize this, and there are, lots of organizations who've now set up alumni networks for their leavers. So Coca-Cola, I know, LinkedIn, Google, JP Morgan, I think all have these alumni networks. And it's really just about connecting and keeping that connection with the alumni who've moved on, but also connecting them with each other as well, because there's something about having that shared sense of connection of having worked somewhere with someone else may help you to build your own network moving forward when you leave that organization as well. So Mercedes, we always used to do some little things like if people left during a championship winning year, we always made sure that they received the same gifts or mementos that the team members, the current team members were given at the end of the season. Because the leavers had contributed to that championship win in the same way that the current team members had, and so therefore they should also receive the recognition. And we often saw people, posting on social media when they received their sort of little championship memento, just saying that Mercedes would always be their Formula One team, and they would always feel part of that team, even though they left it. And that's the kind of takeaway I think you'd want people to take away from any organisation. So it's just thinking about how you keep connected with those people.
And I think it just shows a really, for me, it's really classy when you hear that organizations do that, not just obviously in that, that kind of winner's medal type approach, but also that you've played a part in our success, whether that was, recently or in the past, and therefore we value you. Just kind of really paints the picture for the people who are there now about how we value our people. It's not, we're not treating you as a disposable resource, but you are truly contributing to our organization. I think that it transcends durations of employment, doesn't it? So I totally agree with you, and it's really, really important. So I think if anybody's listening to this and hasn't got some sort of alumni, it doesn't need to be overly sophisticated. It can just be, we meet up once a year and we have a coffee, or we jump onto a Teams call and we find out what people are up to, and we kind of just talk about what we're doing in our business still, if you're interested, that sort of thing. I think it's
Exactly. I think universities do it very well. I don't know if
yeah,
anybody's ever been a
yeah,
university student. It probably gets emails from their
yeah,
alumni association periodically,
yeah,
and it keeps you connected to the news of what's happening within the
yeah,
organisation.
yeah,
Connects you to the opportunities. You may have left as a junior team member or a junior employee, but you've gone on, you've built your career a bit, and you're thinking, well, actually, I'd quite like to go back there.
yeah,
Again, you might be a potential candidate for a job in the future. So
exactly.
there are
Yeah,
all these different
yeah,
reasons why I think it's a really worthwhile activity. And at the end of the day, it's a very simple way of connecting a potential, a really great network of ambassadors for your organisation.
absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's been absolutely fantastic, Nicole. Thank you so much for your time. So, if anybody listening to to this, and I'm sure they do now, and we're thinking about their equivalent of their employees taking a tenth off the lap time of their organisation, whatever that lap time metaphor is, how can they find out more about what you're up to, Nicole, and maybe reach out to you and connect with you if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to connect. You can find me on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
or you can check out the website, which is www.comms-exchange.com.
Brilliant, and I'll put a link into both those into the show notes, which is on our website. If you're listening to this on iTunes, if you go to engagingic.com, find this episode, we will put those links in the show notes, so you don't have to try and remember them or write them down while you're running or driving or wherever you're listening to the podcast. So that's fantastic, Nicole. Well, look, thank you so much, Nicole. All the best with your new adventure, and I'm sure
Thank you.
you'll be you are and will be very busy for the foreseeable future with that, and all of this experience and knowledge that you've got is highly desirable, I think, and certainly in a lot of the organisations we work with, they need someone like you to help them to kind of focus on these areas. So that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for offering to share your time. I know I kind of hijacked you via LinkedIn because I'd seen your post and wanted to speak to you. But thank you, Nicole, and I wish you all the very best.
Thanks, Craig. No, it's been brilliant. Great fun. Lovely
Thank you.
to speak to you.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. If you've got any ideas for episodes you'd like us to cover in future, you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can use the feedback form at engagingic.com. If you're not already subscribed to the show via your podcast platform, please do so. And if you could leave a review for us, that would be absolutely fantastic. We have links to other episodes at engagingic.com. All of our previous episodes are available there. And if you're interested in our visual communication services, our big pictures, our learning maps, our explainer videos, and also our live graphic recording, please get in touch with us again at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. Thank you.